In this video, we are going to review how to graph quadratics, and we are going to go over identifying the domain range, x-intercepts, and y-intercepts. So for our example 1, we need to make a table, and we are going to plug in the values along the x-axis, and we're going to plug them into this equation. So I'm going to plug in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 into this equation. So when I type it in my calculator, I'll do negative parenthesis squared plus 6 parenthesis minus 12. I'm going to enter my numbers in, so negative, I'm going to switch out, this calculator is easier. Negative parenthesis 1 squared plus 6 times 1 minus 12. Negative 7, scroll through, make it a 2, enter, scroll through and make it a 3, scroll through, make it a 4, 5, and 6. Plot my points. I go over 1, down 7, over 2, down 4, over 3, down 3, over 4, down 4, and then it should make a parabola or a U shape. And that's your graph. Example 2, it is already graphed for you. The domain means you're looking at x values. So as I look at my graph, it continues out this direction because of the arrows. So my graph would continue in both directions. So to say that, I would say negative infinity to positive infinity. My range is going to be looking at the graph up and down to see how far it goes. So at the top, it stops at 4, and it opens down, which would be negative infinity. That means down. So I start by using the infinity first. Infinity is negative, which means I have to place it on the left side. I kind of use domain to help set it. And then my 4 will fill in, and it stops at 4. So I have to use the bracket in order to say that the 4 is included, and that's where it stops. X-intercepts would be 2, 0, and this one would be 6, 0. The y-intercept does not show up on this graph, so I would need to plug 0 into my equation, so it would look like this. I would enter that into my calculator, and you'll end up with a negative 12. And then you don't have to show this work, you could just type that in, and that would be your answer for the y-intercept. Alright, domain, again, I check my graph is opening outwards, so it's going to continue in both directions because of the arrows. If the arrows had been cut off, it'd be different, but they will continue, which means negative infinity to positive infinity. My range, it now is at negative 4, and that's where it stops, and it opens up. Up means it will be a positive infinity. I check positive infinities go on the right, and then I slide this negative 4 in, and I need to make sure that it's a bracket, so it stops at negative 4. Intercepts, I have negative 6, 0, and negative 2, 0. My y-intercept won't show up on my graph, so I plug 0 in for the x. When I enter that onto my calculator, it ends up being a positive 12. We have another domain and range. Domain would be negative infinity to positive infinity. My range, it stops at this -1. Oops. -1, and it opens up, which is a positive infinity. Positive infinities go on the right. My -1 fills in the spot, and I make sure that it stops at the -1. Intercepts would be -4, 0, -2, 0. My y-intercept, as I look for it, it doesn't show up, so I would plug in a 0 into my equation, and then whatever I get when I enter that in, I will put right here. So that would be an 8 when I type this into my calculator. For domain, I have it opening outwards in both directions, negative infinity to positive infinity. It stops at +4 and opens down. So I fill my negative infinity in, 4 fills in the blank spot, and it stops. My x-intercepts will be 1, 0, and 5, 0. My y-intercept doesn't show up, so I would plug in a 0, and then whatever my output is, that would be a -5 when I enter this into my calculator. Domain, negative infinity to positive infinity. My range is -2 and it opens down, so negative infinity is first, negative infinity to -2, and it stops at -2. Intercepts, there are no x-intercepts. And my y-intercept is at 0, down 3. It actually showed up on this one. On example 7, the graph is not there, so we are just going to graph it. You don't have to identify. I'm going to plug in the numbers that are on my number line for x. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll see if those work. So I would do parentheses squared minus 8, plug in plus 12, 0, squared minus 8 times 0 plus 12 is 12. Scroll through, make it a 1. Scroll through and make it a 2. Make it a 3. And a 4. And I'm just going to throw in a 5. See what happens. Okay, 0 is at 12, doesn't fit. 1 is at 5, doesn't fit. 2 is at 0. 3 is down 3. 4 is down 4. 5 is down 3. And then I can match to make my parabola or a U shape. Last two. Domain, I have negative infinity to positive infinity. My range, it stops at -4 and opens up. Up is a positive infinity, which means positive infinity lines up. I fill in the gap with my number, and I put that it stops at that number. X-intercepts will be 0, 0. That one will be 4, 0. My y-intercept, if I want to, I can check by plugging it in. Or I can look at my graph, which would be 0, 0 for the y-intercept. Domain on number 9 is negative infinity to positive infinity. My range, it stops at 2 and opens up. Up is a positive infinity, so I line my positive infinity up. I fill it in with the 2, and it stops at 2. There are no x-intercepts, and my y-intercept would be 0, up, 6.